Hey and howdy, how are you doing today? You're probably at this video because somebody linked it to you after a game where they thought something that could improve was your drafting, or that or I linked it to you because you mentioned you didn't kind of know like what you should be doing for drafting. So this is kind of a simple video to explain the main overall parts and just like the general 5 roles that should be in a draft. So I'm moving on. When people talk about a draft is made up, they're generally talking about roles and positions. The positions are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with the idea being 1 gets the most gold and experience and those kind of things, and number 5 gets the least. And the reason that you have that is it's this idea of it's better to have one person with a lot of gold rather than 5 equally distributed, because the one person can then just kind of tank. And then you put the one hero is always going to be very dependent on gold, and the 5 is going to be practically non-existent. Because you have 5 people who need gold to function, you're not going to win compared to a draft that actually has a sort of balance to it. And so I'm just going to go through. What's that slide? So the position 1 is a hard carry, and you probably are used to a lot of people using the term carry for anything that's not a support. I'm really quickly just going to go over that terminology. A carry is specifically somebody who tends to go quite late, and they do quite well with a gold advantage, or a lot of gold. A lot of times, I think the better term and the term people are looking for is core. Like, if I'm running, if I'm going mid-Nyx or something, like mid-Nyx assassin, I wouldn't say I'm carry Nyx, I would say I'm core Nyx. It's that kind of thing that can help make a little more sense, because I'm not going to be attempting to farm the entire game as a Nyx, but I'm stating I'm not supporting. And so that's one of those terms you could use. It really helps. And then people also use semi-support a little liberally. I'm not a big fan of that term. I generally prefer just to say you're either the second support or like the non-hard support. And I'll get to that later when we get to that. But that's just a terminology thing that I notice a lot of people have a problem with, and it creates some weird stuff with their draft. So position 1 is, it's carry. They go into the safe lane, which is bottom for Radiant and top for Dire. Some good examples would be like Juggernaut, Sven, Lifestealer, Anti-Mage, Sniper, Chaos Knight, and I'm sure you can also probably list a multitude. They go pretty good into the mid and late game, and they generally need a lot of farm to function, and they need somebody to help lane with them. And the person that they need to help lane with them is the position 5, also known as the babysitter support, the hard support, or as everybody in my 1 to 2K bracket calls it, the ward whore. So normally they don't really need gold to be effective, and they have decently strong early game. And so you really don't need last hits, and subnote, while you do need some level of gold, learn to pull, learn to stack, learn those things for that. But they should not be directly trying to take last hits, and that's the point of that position 5. Your goal is to just zone and generally try to stay out of lane and let the carry get as much as he needs, because that's the person who's going to be winning the game in effect. The better your job is just to get them as far as they can without them being interrupted. And good examples are heroes like Crystal Maiden, Ogre Magi, Shadow Shaman, Vengeful Spirit, Lich. There's also some really difficult ones that I'm not going to list because I don't want to sit. If you're good, like you can probably figure out what some other good supports are. But you, generally speaking, when you're choosing this, you also want to be aware of if you have another support on your team. Because if there's 2 supports, then I would be more comfortable picking a hero like Crystal Maiden or like an Io even. But if you've got 1 support, choose people who are very, very, very if you're going to run a greedier hero like Warlock or like an Abaddon, make sure you have another support as well. And if you're just going to be solo, be like a Ogre Magi, Crystal Maiden, Shadow Shaman. None of them need too much to function. So that's position 1, and this is our position 5, the hard support. We've gone to position 2. This is the mid. I'm going to assume you're familiar with this. I'm just going to go over it kind of briefly. The general difference, again, you would probably not say carry if you're talking about the mid. You'd probably say they're a core. You really just want somebody who does well with levels and gold. So Yeah, like Invoker, he goes mid because he wants levels. He still wants last hits, and that's an important part of that, but he also doesn't want to be sharing any amount of experience with a support, and normally you choose people who don't need it. So, you also have playmaker heroes who are dependent on their ultimate, like Puck. You have people who are very good at trashing a 1v1 lane and then moving forward, like Lina or Shadow Fiend. You have heroes like Templar Assassin where they require some level of tempo where they do well with an advantage in levels in gold. But moving on from that, we have position 3. That's the offlaner. They're a core hero, and a lot of times in lower brackets, I'll see people get away with throwing carries in the offlane, and that's something you can do. You can try to put a hard farmer. I'd suggest don't do that, because that's a strategy that's not going to be available to you when you get to higher MMRs, but it's an option. Generally speaking, a lot of times you like to run him either solo, or sometimes he does have a support. But the position 3, normally you want to have tankier heroes that can last a while, or heroes that can, farm for themselves. So some good examples are like Bristleback, there's Axe, Legion Commander can heal herself quite effectively, and her Q punishes them for having more people. Tidehunter has Kraken Shell, and his E dissipates damage. Omni Knight recently has been getting up in the meta because he's got heals for himself and Repel. Abaddon is just a tanky motherfucker, and once you hit 6, he can do a lot of damage in an offlane. There's also, I don't have any listed here, but there's heroes like Darkseer or Nature's Prophet, which are able to farm effectively despite being the lane against them, because they either have Ion Shell or they have summons. And occasionally you'll have to, the reason you tend to choose these kind of heroes is you will, a lot of the times, be 1v2, 1v3, and you really can't be choosing a hero like Arc Warden where you're just going to die immediately, or you can't be Anti-Mage where you need that farm. Now moving on to what I would say is the most complicated of all of them is the position 4. And this is where I see a lot of people get confused with what a draft entails, because a lot of times the position 4 can be like another lane support for the off lane. It can be a jungler. It can be a counter jungler if you want to be Bounty or Riki and just make their game a living hell. It can be a roamer or a guy that sits in the tri lane. And most of the time I see jungler. Like, I would say 80% of my games I see a jungler. And I want to point out that it's not always the best pick to just put in another carry. That farm eventually is going to also be farmed by your other cores. So you want to, when you're choosing, like, if I have a game where I have Medusa mid, Anti-Mage safe lane, and let's say I have an Abaddon in the off lane, and all of these people are, like, the Abaddon will probably be fine, but he'll probably just still be generating gold, but Medusa and Anti-Mage are going to keep farming. At that point, I probably shouldn't pick a jungle Legion, because that's going to be a lot of farm stress. If I have, for example, though, like, it's a safe lane Wraith King, it's mid, let's just say, like, Shadow Fiend or someone, he's going to get a Shadow Blade, and after that, he'll probably just walk around killing people, and like an Ursa in the offlane, then yeah, sure, you can play a Legion, you can put Bloodseeker in the jungle. But other than that, if you're going to be running a jungler, you look at people who are less farm intensive. Enigma is less farm intensive as a jungler. Chen, a Chantress. Those are heroes that are less farm intensive as junglers, and they still perform a supporting role. And that's just like, this one's the other confusing one, and then you have roaming. I really suggest roaming. It can win you games. It's where you pick a support and you agree to be denied pretty much the entire time, because you just roam from lane to lane using either like a stun or a slow to secure kills. Like, you can go Pudge and you can just take Rot and you can just make sure that you're like coordinating with the rest of your team, but you can gank really, really easily with some of those skills. Like, at level 1, Bounty Hunter can gank really, really well. Earth Spirit can gank pretty well. It's that kind of thing, and those can really do some those can really help. And it's really, really good for the position 5 if there is a support of some sort. Either, again, a roamer, another lane support, or like a tri-lane member. It takes off the burden, and it makes supporting kind of less painful, and it makes it less of a, they are just going to completely shit on your hard support the entire time, because they are not buying literally every support item. So you can ask yourself some questions for a position 4, like, are we crowded for farm? Is my team early or late? If you have a really late game team, it's probably not a great idea to go for. I mean, it can be, but you probably don't want to choose a hero like Chen or something who's going to be an early game only hero. Another caveat to roaming is if you have a bunch of very passive heroes early, you don't want to be roaming because you're going to end up just under leveled and just kind of a bummer. If you have a solo laner, then you're free to do everything that's not like. Sometimes in lower drafts, people aren't going to have somebody who can solo in the off lane, and you're going to have to just support them. And that's kind of a bummer sometimes, but it's fine most of it. And then the last one is if your team isn't communicating, like it's the 4 Peruvian thing, I'm probably going to suggest you don't choose one of the supporting options because a lot of them require you to be communicating. At that point, I'd probably lock a Jungle Legion or a Bloodseeker, and I would just pray I can out-carry at that point. So, in review, the position 1 is the hard carry. They need gold, and they do well. They go into the safe lane. The position 2 is the mid laner. They are a hero that can 1v1 quite well, and they want levels and gold. They go mid. The off laner is normally a survivable hero that can farm in dangerous situations. They go into the off lane, hence the name. We discussed the position 4 in length. They can be a lot of things like but I would again suggest default being probably lane or roaming support, or one of the softer junglers like Chen or Enigma, where they don't take up too much farm. And then position 5 is your hard support. And so that's going to be pretty much for this. If you thought it was useful, good. My goal is just so people can be more informed. If you're one of the 10K Redditors and you notice I made a mistake, please tell me. I'd love to fix it.